It's now 7 p.m., Tuesday, May 7th, 2019. I would like to call the Selectmen's meeting to order. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next would be public forum limited to 5 minutes per topic. Discussion or comments about town employees or agency members shall be avoided so as not to violate individuals' rights. Anyone here for public forum? Yes.
Joyce Smith, I would like to inform you that I'm not going to plant flowers in front of the stones out here this year. It's been 25 years that I've been doing it in memory of my dad, who was the first James A. Smith, and he was a selectman in the 40s and 50s, and he was on every town board I think there was, and he ended up his career by taking care of the common, and he always took care of the flag on the common. So when he died, I had money left in memory of him, which ran out a long time ago, but I've been doing it for 25 years, and I think I'm at the end of planting those flowers, and I contacted the garden club, and they're going to take over.
Oh, nice.
So I just wanted
Thank you, Joyce. That's
just
nice.
wanted to mention that
Yeah.
for 25 years they've been in memory of my dad.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you,
very
Joyce.
Now I'm going to go find out about my relatives at the Salem witch trials.
I know, I was disappointed to miss that tonight.
Next would be the Board of Selectmen minutes from April 16th, 2019.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes from our April 16th, 2019 meeting as presented.
Second?
Motion's been made and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Next would be recognitions, the Girl Scout Silver and Gold recognitions. Wendy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may, in grateful acknowledgement of many years of faithful service to the Girl Scouts of Central and Western Massachusetts and the town of Sutton, it is hereby resolved by the town of Sutton and the Sutton Board of Selectmen that this certificate of recognition is awarded to Christina Longo, Myra Page, Trinity DeStefano, Olivia Marchand, and Mia Larson for achieving the 2019 Silver Award status, and to Samantha Warren for achieving the 2019 Gold Award status in Girl Scouting. Whereas Christina, Myra, Trinity, Olivia, Mia, and Samantha, as members of the Girl Scouts, have generously given their time and effort and have served in dignified, faithful, and Girl Scout-like manner, and be it further resolved that the Sutton Board of Selectmen, on behalf of all residents of Sutton, commend and congratulate these girls on their most prestigious achievement. The Board of Selectmen and the town of Sutton are proud to wish them well in all future endeavors.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Next would be the 4th of July, Green Line Velo, Daniel Fitzgibbon. Just want to state your name and everything and why you're here, please.
My name is Daniel Fitzgibbons.
Proceed.
Yep, thank you. And with the Green Line Velo bicycle racing team, and we are here to propose again our annual bicycle race that happens in June.
And I'm AJ Moran. I'm the president of Green Line Velo.
Welcome.
Thank you. From a logistical standpoint, the proposal for the race would be effectively the same things we've done in previous years. First race would start about 8 o'clock in the morning. We're usually wrapped up on the roads between 5 and 6 o'clock. Course would kind of begin and end at the Simonian Center on Boston Road, and would go down basically to where the new police station is on the corner there. Take Central Turnpike to Uxbridge, down Mendon, onto Barnett. What's the road after Barnett?
Right onto Whitens.
Onto Whitens, yep. up Manchog, around the reservoir, and then up Blackie to join back up. We kind of do loops on that in a similar fashion to previous years. So.
I'd like to open it up to the board for questions.
Sure.
Dave?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome. Appreciate you coming in, as always. You know, it seems like it's very similar to what we've done in the past. The issues that we've had with residents in the past really are about, I'd say, notification as much as anything, because it does impact some of the roadways that that you travel across. Some of them, you know, reasonably significant. There's at least partial road closures and half lanes and that kind of thing. So I just want to make sure that we've done all of the outreach, or will do all of the outreach that we normally do to let all of our residents know dates and things like that.
Yes, and so we have a flyer going out to the residents within the next week, and we'll flyer again the week ahead of the race. And so last year we kind of addressed this by having no road closures whatsoever. And so there were sections of the course, particularly on Mendon Road, the descent, and Barnett Road, where in prior years we had limited it to one-way traffic going in the direction of the race just as a pure safety concern. And we understood and heard the residents' concern about not being able to travel the opposite way to their homes or whatever. And so we've had marshals and policemen on the ends of those roads to kind of inform and warn drivers that a race could be coming up in the road. And some additional measures we've made for safety within the races themselves are to have moto officials and refs on motorcycles have radio communication between the lead car and the field, so that the lead car can be far enough ahead that to alert the moto, who can alert the field that if there's a driver coming in the opposite direction of the race, people can expect it, as opposed to not being able to expect it and having an incident occur.
Yeah. And that's the way you ran it last year?
Yes.
And did you get any kind of additional feedback from the public?
No, I mean, we always talk to all of our marshals after the race to see if we had any issues with any of the residents, and last year it seemingly went well. And,
We didn't get anything from the town either.
Okay.
I didn't get anything. I talked to the Sutton police, and they didn't have anything to report in that regard either. So.
And the race sort of runs in heats, is that?
Correct.
Correct. So there's 3 racing fields per wave, and there's 3 waves. So there will be 9 races throughout the day.
Yeah.
And they're spaced about 5 minutes. Each field on course is spaced about 5 minutes apart. So you'll get them through an intersection, and then 5 minutes later you'll get the next group, and
Yeah.
so on. And as the race goes on, maybe it breaks up a little bit, and there are more stragglers on course. But once riders are outside of what is known as the race caravan, they're expected to adhere to normal rules of the road and travel alongside traffic as they would normally, not in an event.
And so this is now a number of years consecutively that you've had this race?
This is the 10th year.
10th year. So there must be something about this site that is good.
No, it's worked really well for us. The terrain is really special, and it really highlights kind of the terrain that Central Mass is known for. Lots of nice rolling hills, and you know, the course goes down by Purgatory Chasm State Park. There's some beautiful mountain biking there. A lot of riders we know, and a lot of the community of mountain biking goes and rides the trails there. And it there's also a local frame builder that works on Whitens Road, Mike Zagganato, who's local to Sutton and works in Sutton. He's a big part of the cycling community, and yeah, I think there's a lot of good racing out here, and it's been the Massachusetts State Championships for 5 or 6 years, I want to say.
Great. Yeah. Well, that's really all I have. You know, from my perspective, I'm pleased that you've sort of learned from what you're hearing and responding to the feedback, and I say welcome, and hope you have another great race. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Jesse?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dan, AJ, welcome. Thank you for coming. Dave managed to touch upon most of my thoughts and concerns. I appreciate the fact that, Jim, you'd mentioned that there was no calls at Town Hall of complaints?
No, and there's, the details have been worked out with both fire and police. They've been responsive in dealing with that beforehand, so.
And they've signed off on it again, I'm assuming, at this
That's
point?
correct.
All right, excellent. And then I guess the only real substantive question I have is in terms of the flyers that you send out. They do have contact information on them, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I'd just like to stress that to anyone who's watching at home, that if for some reason you do have any concerns, Dan and AJ, it's a great group, it's a great organization, as they mentioned, they've been in town for 10 years with few, if any, complaints, so if there's any residents who are watching that have any concerns, once they get the flyer in the mail, just give you guys a buzz.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Wendy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, your special terrain is not kidding me. I've run up Lackey Road before, so.
Yeah, no, it's that's kind of the draw of the course, and it's a
Yeah.
really unique feature that we don't see in a lot of road racing in New England.
Yeah, no, it's great, and after 10 years, I know the little lead car beeping as it goes by is my indicator if I'm behind in my yard work or not, so. Welcome back, and happy 10-year anniversary.
Thank you so much.
Jonathan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for coming in. It sounds like you've been doing this for 10 years. You've been making some adjustments. There's really no concerns I have at this point. I think Dave covered most of what I was concerned about. And good luck, and I hope everything goes well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I agree with all my colleagues, and I wish you well, especially, 10 years, and
Yeah,
it's
well.
been a long time, and, you've been a real professional, standout group, and we welcome you all the time. So I'm anxious to ask to have someone read this motion. Dave?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the Green Line Velo cycling race to be held on Sunday, June 9th, 2019, between the hours of 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., with detailed police officers and EMS road signage in place and a copy of the insurance rider on file in the town manager's office prior to the event.
Second?
Motion been made second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks again for coming out.
Okay.
Next would be the 4th of July Parade Committee discussion on a one-day beer license.
Welcome back.
We have a presentation to do.
And before we start, just for the people that are listening, would you please identify
Oh,
yourself?
sorry. I'm Jonathan Rochelow, and
I'm Donna Libby.
we represent the Sutton 4th Committee. So we're here to talk about a beer tent. We had talked about the entire project last time we were here, and we had mentioned we were thinking of a beer tent, and we wanted to put that discussion off. Actually, wanted everyone here to have a little time to think about it and digest the idea and give it some thought. So today I'd like to discuss it. So would like to give a quick little presentation here if I could. So the most important thing I want to do is, I don't think I'm in the right mode here, but it gets the point across. I want to make a distinction between, or define what we're looking for. What we're talking about is really a craft beer tent. We don't want a bar. We don't want this to be a drinking event. This is a Sutton 4th of July event primarily. The beer tent idea is just an additional attraction for adults. We have a lot going on for children. The entire common is a children's event. There are a lot of activities for kids. There's not a lot to do for parents, not parents, but adults that do not have kids. And we want to cover everybody. We want to make this an event that everybody can enjoy. So we feel that a beer tent adds something. A lot of people are very, very much for it. I think you don't have to do a poll to understand that. A lot of people in town would enjoy it. A craft beer tent specifically, I think, fits this event a little bit more than something that's more along the lines of a bar. And there's a reason for that. I'd like to explain my thought process. Craft beers, unless you've been living under a rock, you realize the popularity of craft beers has exploded in the past 10 years. It's become a thing. It's very popular, especially with the younger crowd. Along with that growth, I think something interesting has happened in that our society has evolved a little bit when it comes to public drinking. Through the hard work of groups like MAD, there have been a huge shift in drinking and driving. Most people these days are very much aware of the dangers. When it comes to alcohol consumption at public events, we've matured. This is especially true with craft beers because they're a little bit more refined appeal to them. It's not the same as, in the old days, a typical bar scenario. Craft beers are a little bit more special.
Little different demographic, let's say.
Right. So, to make that point, I'm old enough to remember Animal House. That's not what we want. We just want something that's a mature drinking scenario.
Like Animal House.
It's I could add a lot more fun with those pictures, but that was just to make that point. And this isn't just me. In the area, I just did a very quick search of events that are serving beer or beer-related events, and they all hinge around the craft beer concept. And the reason why these events are happening nowadays and it's become so popular is because of that change in society and in the norms. People know how to behave at these types of events. Again, this is just a very quick sampling of some of these are beer-related events, or beer-only events, but a lot of them are, food trucks and beer, but these all happen for a reason. We know how to do this now. Our society is better adapted at behaving at this type of thing. People know, they're familiar with this type of scenario in a public event. The reasons why we want to do it specifically, we feel this, as you know, that we're shutting down all the roads in this area. It's going to be a full day event. We're not naive. We know people are going to bring beer to the event. There are a lot of homes along the paths that are closed down. There will be drinking. I feel there's going to be less of that if people know that beer is available on site. You're not going to get people sneaking it into the concert area. Why take that chance when you can just buy it right there on the site? So I think overall it helps in that regard. That localizes the drinking to a cordoned off area that we would have as this beer tent. Police details would be there to control it and recognize anybody drinking too much. At this event, we have full control over it, so we don't have to have the same standards of shutting people off at a bar. We can shut people off whenever we want. I think we'll just have much more control there. It's an enhancement to the event, obviously. I think it's a plus. And we'd like to work with David Fields with Wormtown Brewery. He's very much on board with this idea. He's a local. He lives in town. He owns Wormtown Brewery. He's helped me out hang. He's always there for us, and I'd like to do something to help him out. And that's what this event is about. As much as we can, we're trying to support local businesses and promote local businesses. So that's a big part of this. Another big part of it is it's an additional revenue stream for us. This year, it's our first year, a lot of outflow of cash. We're trying to find avenues where money can come in so that we're not out having to knock on so many doors next year to do this again, begging for money. We need to generate some money. This would be a big help in that regard. With us, the town, we're very willing to work with you guys. You'd have full say, full control over everything here. Any way you would want to do this, we're willing to do it. Our option is not to do this. So we want your full support, and we're willing to do this in any way you think would be good. It's, if you have any ideas on anything on this, how to set it up, anything, we're very willing to work with you on that. So I think it's a good opportunity for the town to to do it right. Tell us how to do it right, and we'll do it right. Again, the idea of full control is important here. We'd be looking at bringing in our own pourers and really maintaining full control of this thing from start to finish. And that's why Dawn is here. She's a little more of a subject matter expert here than I am on this. So I'd like to pass it off to her if you have questions on any of the, she could explain the details of
Sure.
what we're
Hello,
at here.
thank you. A lot of you probably don't know me. Donna, I've been in the hospitality business, working in various hotels and venues for over 30 years, and very familiar with liquor laws, food. I mean, that's part of why, I'm handling, managing the food part of this, and hopefully this beverage part as well. As you can see, as we said before, all the food trucks that are going to be here, there's going to be plentiful, lots of food for people to be able to enjoy. And of course, we'd like them, as John said, to enjoy some beverages as well. The adult beverages are provided through consolidated distributors. That's the distributor that would be applying for the one-day license. It's supported by Wormtown Brewery. And as John said, Wormtown would be the only brewery that we would be working with at this point. Wormtown assorted, what we're going to be offering is Wormtown assorted beers as well as domestic beers. So that would mean, David said his summer ale perhaps, and maybe an IPA, which is very popular as well. And then domestic beers too. You always have to have a Bud Light, Miller Lite there for someone to enjoy. The proposed service will be from 5 to 8 p.m. only. As you realize, the parade starts at 4, and the fireworks will end at 9:30 or so, 10 o'clock perhaps, but we're just really limiting the service to a 3-hour maximum. We'd be, as John said, open to any suggestions in that matter as well. The service itself. All persons maintaining or pouring in this area will be TRIP certified, and if you don't know what that is, I have an explanation or a description as responsible service. Anyone in the industry, restaurants, bars, hotels, anywhere that liquor is served, needs to be TIP certified in Massachusetts. And the acronym is Training for Intervention Procedures. It's the global leader in education and training for the responsible service, safe, and consumption of all alcohol. Proven effective by third-party studies, TIPS is a skills-based training program designed to prevent intoxication, underage drinking, and drunk driving. I'm TIP certified, and anyone that would be inside that beer tent pouring, a cashier, would have to be TIP certified. There would be no one inside that tent that is working the tent that would not be TIP certified. Everyone would have their certifications, and I can have them all on file. If we can go back up to the other slide, please. So this restricted area will be roped off. I'm hoping many of you might remember the Celtic Festival. I was part of that conception of that. I was working with the Blackstone Valley Tourism Committee at that time and helped in the conception of that. And if you remember, it was a very successful event over at King Farm. It was wonderful. There was a large beer tent with many more beers than what we're offering here, and it worked out very well. There'll be one entrance and one exit from the tent, and at those entrances, that entrance or exit, there'll be a detailed police officer standing at each one of them. Beer cups will be 12 ounces only. You might be familiar with the red plastic cups. Those are 16 ounces. For me, that's a little bit much. I prefer the 12 ounce, would be plenty for a nice drink of beer. There'll be a limit of 2 beverages per purchase. In the state of Massachusetts, you're allowed to only serve 2 drinks per person. Doesn't mean they're limited to that, but if you were to go up to, at a Patriots game, a baseball game, you're only allowed to buy 2 drinks, and that's what will limit it here as well. There'll be a close and an exit place will be in place. So in the event that a police officer or committee member or anyone comes to our attention and says, this is getting out of hand, there is some underage drinking, there is, any scenario that you can think of, it will be closed immediately. In my industry, a portable bar, say, if you're at a wedding, ours need to be on rolling tables. And that is for the quick and effective close of a bar. If, as a manager, I were to go up to, the bartender and said, nope, he's been shut off and he's still, someone's buying him drinks, shut down the bar. And believe me, I've done it many times. I have no tolerance for over-drinking. I have no tolerance for any shenanigans when it comes to alcohol. This is an adult beverage. There won't be anyone within our power, within that tent, that is underage or over-drinking. So there'll be that in place. We can get more into detail about that if you'd like. No one under the age of 21 will be allowed in this area. And the police officers and the people that will be manning the cash register and the tickets, or however we decide, it is decided that they're gonna be paying for their beverage at the opening of the tent area, receiving some kind of token or whatever, to give to the pourers, and they'll pay for those, and to give to the pourers and the pourers will know that they are able to, that they paid for a beer. The entrance, as I said, will have a cashier and a manager that's also tip certified, checking IDs. There'll be 2 Sutton police officers in this area, as I said, at the entrance and the exit. Sorry, I didn't mean to be redundant that way. Are there any questions?
I'd like to see the map.
I would like to add one quick thing. I've done a lot of research myself on best practices for towns that run events that include beer seals. And Donna's points are spot on. It's, everything I've found through my research, she has covered here. So it filled me with a lot of confidence to see that. We really, I think, have everything covered here, but open it to questions.
If I could just add one other thing. The people that are going to be pouring will not be, Wormtown cannot pour. They can supply the beer. They can be there and talk about their beers and the kinds that they have to offer and all of that. I think David would be very helpful in that way. It would enhance, if you go to a wine tasting, you love talking to the vendor and, asking about the wines and what it'll be paired with and the like. He'll be there for that, but the pourers would be hired by us. So they would have nothing to do with Wormtown at all. So they would be hired professionals within my industry, people that I know and trust, to be pouring that day.
And one other point, the location of this, we didn't mention. The initial thought, and we're still thinking in the parking lot of the church, and that the church is not fully decided on this. If we were to be allowed to do this with the permit, the church would still have to okay. The other option, and I don't think it's on here, it doesn't quite fit on this picture, but between Polly's and the blacksmith shop, the owner of that land has offered that for this use as well. So we have those 2 options, so just so you know where we're talking. One of the key elements to that line of thinking is the kids area is on the common. We don't want to mix the beer with the kids. Concert area is back here, that's sort of a mix. So here would be separated from the kids, but be close to the concert area. Behind Polly's would be separated from everybody. And again, there's not a lot of space there, and we're not talking about a German-style beer garden. We're talking about a tent for a craft beer tent.
Well, there would be a place, because they would not be able to walk outside of the beer tent with their unfinished beer.
Right.
So there's no public drinking, as we all know. So the tent would be large enough for people to gather a little bit while they enjoyed their beverage, and then they would depart. So we're talking about a flow of this. I can't imagine people.
Which inherently will slow down anybody who's likely to drink a lot. They're going to have to get back in line if they want, and I am imagining there will be a line to get into this. So it is going to slow down the consumption just by the size of the tent.
And as John pointed out in one of the previous slides, there'll be specific cups. So any police officer, security person, anyone will know if someone else is walking around with something that is not legal. So it's just a quick, there's not going to be any red cups from us. So It'll be
Okay.
easily recognizable.
So we keep interrupting the
That's
question.
I know,
kind of.
I'm
Why don't
sorry,
you-
I'm sorry.
No, I'm just, so why don't we open that up to questions or
Sure.
comments?
Are we done with the presentation? We can-
Yes.
It's not as long as the last one.
Thank you for your explanation, and I'd like to open it up to all my colleagues, and I would start with Dave Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So thanks again for coming back. You know, I think going back to last year, you know, you've been great about bringing forth ideas and being open about where you're going with all this stuff, and gives us an opportunity to understand what you're thinking of and plan. So that's helpful. And I guess the first question I have is, what exactly is being asked of us tonight? I mean, you say someone else later would come with an actual request, so we don't have that in front of us today.
Oh, no, what I meant when I said that was, we were here last time and we
Yeah.
broached the subject, but we didn't discuss it. So tonight I was wanting to discuss it and ask for the permission of the board to move forward with this. I personally don't know the exact sequence of events that has to happen here to request the license. Obviously, something has to be filled out,
Yeah.
but we're looking for the support of the board and
Okay.
guidance of the board. And we're, you
Okay.
know, we respect your opinion, and that's why we're here.
So I do have a number of questions, and I'm trying to,
No, be my guest.
although I think I'm gonna start with, you know, just kind of my feeling about the whole thing. So, you know, my opinion is, you know, we have tried to be supportive of this event. I think we have been supportive of this event. You know, to be honest with you, this is a little bit of I'll call it a wedge issue for the board. And I'm still happy to hear your thoughts. But, you know, before I go any further, I guess coming into this discussion, my thought is, my preference would be to try it for a year and then come back and ask. That's where I would start. I think there's an awful lot of things about this parade itself, the entire event, that is, you know, it's obviously new. It's first run through. So, you know, maybe for me, but I'd say generally for this board, this is kind of another big leap. And I guess without asking for an answer, my question would be, what would be the harm of waiting a year, seeing how the event goes the first time, and then trying it from there? With that said, I got a bunch of questions, if I could ask that, if I could do that. So you're proposing between 5 and 8 p.m., and I guess my question is, what else is really going on as part of the event during that time period?
Primarily, the kids area opens around 3, that goes all night.
Okay.
There were walking tours, that kind of thing that happens sporadically throughout the day. The main thing that's gonna be happening is the concert. There are 2 bands that are playing. One starts at 5, goes to 7, there's one from 7 to 9. So this would sort of be in conjunction with the concert
Yeah.
part of this.
And the layout that you had there, frankly, would sort of dovetail nicely with that, right? That
Right.
they would be sort of close together.
Right.
You know, the map, although that came last, the first thought that I had when I looked at it is, I would anticipate what you said, is that there actually would be probably more demand than you had room for in that tent area. And so you'd be likely to have a sort of a queue, potentially outside of that area,
Mhm.
which is, you know, it's just an observation as much as anything. So, you know, I guess as I think about it, my simple question is, you know, what's the main goal? I mean, what do you think it adds that not having it?
To me, I don't know if you went to the Celtic Festival so many years ago, I don't know
Yeah,
when that was.
actually I did
but
not,
if
so.
if you talk to anybody who did,
Yeah.
I find the first response you get is the beer tent. Everybody remembers the beer tent because it was a unique part of that event that separates it from other events like Waters Farm Days, et cetera. There are a lot of great events, a lot of things geared for kids in town, any town. Most events are geared around children. I want this event, you know, from day one, I've stated this, that I just want this to be an event for the entire town, for everybody. you know, I understand the not controversy, but the hesitation to do something like this. It's a serious matter, there are serious implications, and we are taking it seriously, and I understand that and appreciate that. But on the other hand, it's, as I say, you don't even have to take a poll. You talk to most adults and their eyes light up when you say they might, you know, maybe we can do a beer tent. It's just a nice ad, so it's not a necessity. We're gonna have this event without it if we have to. It's not gonna destroy the event, it's not gonna wreck the event, but I think it would just be a nice finishing touch to the entire thing. And it's really about meeting everybody's desires for this
Yeah.
event. And it's those people without children that, you know, the 30s, 40 crowd that are just looking for something a little extra. We're gonna have 4 hours of music. That's a long time to just sit there watching music. You want something else to do, and I think this would be a nice little distraction.
Have you been able to do any sort of forecasting around revenue generation?
I want to hold off on that because we're talking about donated beer and so forth, so it's in the numbers involved, you know, we're talking several thousands of dollars, which it also depends on where we do this because we're in talks with the church where we'd split the profits on that, so it's a significant amount of money that would go towards next year.
Yeah.
It's guessing though.
Yeah, sure.
We just don't know. We don't know how many people are gonna show up, how many are gonna be willing to stand in the line. It is gonna be a smaller
Right.
beer tent, so there will be a line. You know, how many people we can get through, it depends on how long they stay and so forth.
Yeah,
So
and you said like I could walk through and buy 2 drink tickets at the entrance, and so my time in the tent, if I did that, would be long enough to consume 2 beers.
right, and that varies widely.
So 3 or 4
And
minutes.
typically, it's for one is for you and one is for your significant other,
Sure.
usually, typically.
Right.
They're not double fisting it.
Yeah.
So,
So it also depends on what, you know, if it's right near the music, people can stand in there and still listen, where if they
Yeah.
go across the street, they may wanna, you know, drink it quickly and get back. So
Okay.
there are a lot of variables, so I'd hate to guess on
could I just make,
numbers.
for me, this event and its first impression is going to be key to future events. And as, you know, John uses enhancement, and I think it is an enhancement. If, you know, when this goes well, if this is allowed, you know, people are just gonna walk away from all of this and put it on their calendar for next year. It's just, you know, a great first impression. It's like, yes, there was everything for the kids. That parade was great, the common was great for the kids, the music was great, and I got to have a beer. So, you know, it's about first impressions as far as I'm concerned. So that I just really wanted to make
Yeah,
that point.
no, I appreciate that.
Mhm.
One last comment from me, I guess I didn't realize till you just said it, that they were gonna donate the beer. So,
Some of it.
Oh, no,
Some
not
of it.
all of it.
So,
So-
okay. All right, so-
yeah. So my point is, there are a lot of variables, so I couldn't give you an accurate number, but it is in the several of thousands of dollars, so. it's a
The last
significant-
thing though, but you're confident that the revenue stream would pay for the police officers that you would have
Oh,
to have
yeah,
there?
yeah.
And
Easily.
you're gonna pay the
Yeah.
people that are serving?
I mean,
and-
another
Yes,
portion
yes.
of this is that we would be charging, you know, it's not cast in stone, but we're thinking like $6 per beer for a 12-ounce beer, which is quite expensive.
Yeah.
But that in itself will slow down the consumption. But I think, you know, I think all of us, if you were at an outdoor event in the middle of summer and there's a beer tent for $6, you're gonna spend $6.
Yeah.
It's
It's a charity
lot,
event
but
at the
it's,
end of the day, right? So,
It is,
Yeah.
and so.
all right, well, I'm curious to hear from my colleagues, so thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. Thanks you for coming. It was a lot of information to think about. I am going to do the opposite of what Dave did. I'm going to start with my questions first, then I'm going to reserve comments. Could you answer for me, in a general kind of way, what is the scope of your insurance policy?
We'd have a separate policy just to cover this beer tent. It's, I believe it's 5 million total, probably 2 million, 5 million type policy. And again, that's something I would want to discuss with everyone here. If you didn't think that was adequate, we'd raise it. But we can afford that policy easily within the, to cover it. The revenue generated by this would easily cover that policy, which to us is about $1,000.
Okay, the reason why I asked that question is I know in Massachusetts, they're pretty strict in terms of social host laws, in terms of people who go to a place, consume alcohol and then, something amiss arises. And my concern is ultimately is the location. With the Celtic Fest, that was up on King Farm. The site was fully contained. If you're talking either behind Polly's or over at the church, it's really easy to spill over into town property. And my concern ultimately would be is if something amiss goes awry on town property, then it's suddenly potentially a town issue. Because ultimately, while you guys would carry the insurance policy, the town has deeper pockets. And ultimately, that's what's gonna drive my concern, more so than anything. I want you guys to be successful. I've been very supportive of your group, and I'm glad with the willingness of all the volunteers to do this. But at the end of the day, my seat on the board, I have to be concerned with the town first. And again, it's not like we have a big community where there's a big space where all this can take place. We're talking tight areas, which to me just kind of, I guess, increases not necessarily the likelihood that something's gonna happen, but definitely the risk. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I don't wanna see something go wrong because all of the work that the volunteers put in, it will mitigate it, just like that. And then ultimately, there could be liability that comes back onto the back of the taxpayers. And ultimately, I'm not in favor of that as well. So that's definitely concerning to me. 2 additional officers. Do we have enough officers? Because we're gonna have officers stationed at all of the intersections, are we not?
Yes.
And then we're talking additional.
Yeah, there will be enough officers. It is a Sunday. The detail rate is high. I'm sure you've seen an estimate of that,
Yeah,
Bill.
fully aware.
It will be, and I'm guessing, if there are not enough officers, there'll be no problem getting part-time officers or other towns to do this detail because it's so lucrative for the officers.
So that's a possibility.
Yes.
The last question that I have.
Probability, I would say, in my opinion.
And the last question I have, I suppose, is more geared towards the former chief of police, who was the chief at the time of the Celtic Fest. John, do you happen to remember or recall if there was any incidents that stemmed from the Celtic Fest?
I can't recall. I don't remember.
Okay, because I'd definitely be curious about that because we don't have anything to look back on in terms of the parade. So if that's the closest thing that we have, if there was a situation that arose from the Celtic Festival, then to me, there's red flags right there. So those are the basic questions that I have, pretty straightforward. So I suppose I'll end it that my train of thought is similar to Dave's. Personally, I'd rather have you give this a go without the beer the first time around and see what happens. Because that will allow you to better plan for the future rather than in your first year have to react to something, which again could just undo it all relatively quickly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Wendy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for coming. Great presentation. I was going to ask you about the division of proceeds, but I'll hold off on that. I am happy to hear that you're proposing a limited serving time of 3 hours. I know there was some concern that it would be going on through the fireworks and people would be moving back and forth between those 2 locations, so I do find that somewhat comforting. And I mean, a number of the road races that I run in, the Slattery's 5K, the Wachusett to Wachusett, you run from the mountain, the ski mountain, to the brewery. These are not uncommon events. They happen literally every weekend day throughout New England. I frankly have confidence that our uniformed police officers will be able to handle the situation. And it's a new event, and I don't see any reason to not market it as an event with multiple offerings to appeal to everybody in our community. I think that's part of the job you have as a committee, is to tailor what you're offering, and you've done that with the children's area. And I don't see this as being anything terribly unusual. Like I said, at these road races, I see adults properly consuming adult beverages and then going on their merry way. So I, for one, am in favor of the option. If either the church or the owner of Polly's is willing to alert their own insurance carriers to the fact that this event will be potentially occurring there, in addition to the liability insurance that you're either have obtained or would be obtaining, I think that covers the town's liability in that event. So Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Jonathan?
Thank you. I'm in a similar camp as Wendy on this. I'm, with the smaller window, I think that gives me some comfort and it kind of limits the risk. You've obviously put a lot of thought into, making it so that it would be difficult for people to just keep circling back in and out. I am interested in the church's point of view on this, to make sure, I want to understand from their perspective. What did you mention a price point that you're thinking about?
$6.
$6. So that kind of puts it up a little bit higher, so that people aren't gonna. The other question I have too is around. You mentioned craft beer, but then which also I think limits it because usually craft beers are usually heavier and people don't typically, drink lots of those. But you also mentioned that you're gonna offer like traditional lager type beers like Budweiser and things like that. So that's not craft beer. So I was just kind of wondering if you could clarify that.
Well, it was suggested that we offered because it is a distinctive taste, and IPA is a distinctive beer. It is a little bit more of a bite. We're also thinking of a white ale, a summer ale, that they would like. So we're trying to please everyone. So to have one domestic type of beer for someone that does not prefer the craft, but we can certainly keep it to Warm Town's brew. Absolutely.
I mean, that would be my preference because you're advertising it as a craft beer, and I do think that craft beer does limit the amount of consumption, and also you're highlighting a local brewery as well. So
Absolutely.
maybe offer
No, it's a
another
good point.
version that's a little bit lighter from
Absolutely.
him versus, a national brand.
We can absolutely do that.
So that would be my preference, but, as I said, overall, I'm in the same camp as Wendy. I think, I definitely, I support this, with all the, controls that you've put in place.
Thank you.
So.
Thank you.
I was very happy when you come in a couple weeks ago and give your presentation. And I must say, within the last year, the committee has done an outstanding job on everything that you have planned. But there's three unknowns that no one can predict. It's crowd control, parking, and traffic, and with the road closures. I have a little bit of trouble, but I'm not the police department. I'm here as a selectman and soon-to-be citizen. I worry about the road closures in some ways because it's a long time for the distances that you said where they're gonna be closed. For example, Central Turnpike at Uxbridge Road, all day long and through the night. Singletary Ave at Wheelock, Boston at Amesbury. As you just heard from the race people that we had here that've been involved in 10 years, for those simple roads that we have them traveling, when they first started, we had several complaints because the residents didn't want to get disrupted. And they were, now we have them send out notifications. Well, I guess my own opinion, and I have a right to give my own opinion, that I think people will be disturbed if the roads are closed for that magnitude of time. But now we get to the alcohol portion. And I've been a selectman for 12 years and on the police department before that. And not to brag about my time, but I have approximately 53 years of public service. And I've always tried to be, with my opinions on many things, in the best interest of the town of Sutton. And I've been comfortable with that. I can go home and I can live with that. I think you have a lot on your plate. I think you have a lot of positive things that are gonna be done. But I do worry about alcohol. And you have set some criteria and professional stop points and everything else. But I think if you have a permit at the Congregational Church, which is close to these other areas that you pointed out, a kids section and everything else, to me, that's gonna open up a Pandora's box. And as you know, you folks have heard me many a times speak at town meetings and speak here that I'm old-fashioned. I don't like to change the landscape of this town. And my favorite saying, as Jim will know, I like to do everything in moderation. And then I worry if you're gonna have it next to the blacksmith shop, for all the area that's in Sutton, that's less than a postage stamp area. And proximity to that, it's all town property, all around there. And I worry about people coming from there, maybe getting, who knows, sprained ankle or injury or something. And does that liability go on to the town after? And the owner of Polly's Antiques, is he aware that he's gonna have to come up with a liability policy if he has that on site?
Yeah, he's willing to comply with what it's gonna take to
Okay.
do this. And I
And-
should say the priority is to do it on the church property.
Okay.
That's probably
And
where
then,
we
you know, under the application process from the ABCC and the licensing authority and everything, we have, you know, it's the local licensing authority that has the pretty much final say on giving this one-day permit. But there are guidelines, and they do suggest about insurance and everything. You've mentioned some of that. And the 60-day notice that I once said, that's a suggested time frame, not an absolute. But as we only meet once and twice a month, that coincides with the laws under the local license, under the Alcohol Beverage Control Commission. So, I have thought about this, and I think it's just gonna open up some other avenues. And I think with everything else that you have going on, my suggestion, in my opinion only, would be to not have alcohol at this event, because I look at this as the same type of event as we have at the Chain of Lights. It's a family day, folks. It's for all ages. It's for all walks of life. And yes, you want a place for adults. Well, between the festivities during the afternoon and then the fireworks at 9:30 at night, there are gonna be a lot of people around. Even one of the local papers quoted possibly 3,000 people in town that day. And that's a lot of people. And that's a lot of parking spaces that we have to have. And that's a lot of crowd control. But at this time, I just feel as though you have a lot on your plate, and you've done one heck of a good job with a lot of things. And I would like to pass on the alcohol, and my position would say no. Thank you. So, Jim?
Well, they're not here with an application. This is supposed to be a discussion, which we've had. So I don't know what the next step would be.
I don't know, because I haven't done this before, I don't know what the process is, so.
Well, the official process is you have someone come in and fill out the application, and then we eventually submit it to the Board of Selectmen for consideration.
Okay.
You know, you didn't want to go that route, you just
Well,
want to
I
have a
thought this
sit-down
step was
discussion.
that consideration. I thought that's what this was, but
Yeah.
apparently we have to fill the form out first,
Yes,
so,
yeah.
okay.
Is that a public hearing, Jim? If they come before, do you have to have a public hearing on that, or is that just a
No,
regular board
no, it's
vote?
just, it's for the board's consideration. You're the licensing authority.
Yep.
You're ultimately the ones in charge of that. And in this case, you know, the question of whether it would be the church would be the applicant, or the 4th of July committee, I'm not exactly sure.
Can I actually ask a question regarding that too? I know there's a hold harmless agreement that the town generates. I have to think that has some significant legal impact on any potential litigation against the town.
Oh, I'm sure, yet I do think that.
I know how lawyers are, but,
Yeah, no
You don't
offense
have
on
to say
lawyers.
it.
The
but I mean,
present
that's the
company
whole
excluded.
point of a hold harmless agreement.
It is, we have the same situation with Marion's Camp, any situation that we have leased out town property, we've insisted on that at certain levels of liability. Doesn't mean we won't be an additionally named in the lawsuit. Because of the fact that the town has money, it's
Right.
taxpayers' money, but
Right.
it's money, versus an organization that doesn't have money. So, you know, it's kind of a broad statement, but that, we insist that every license agreement we give out for any town-owned property, we make sure that the indemnity is signed.
Is that the same form, like, you know, when Valancourt gets the one-day beer and wine license, it's the same?
Yeah, or even, you know, the Dudley Gendron, or any sort of one-day event.
Okay.
So what do we do
somebody
from
has to go
here?
fill out a form.
Can I fill it out right now? Is it, so what do we do?
So you need to have
We fill
another
that
agenda
out.
item before the board, so you'd have to fill it out and then.
Yeah, this was never meant, this has always been a discussion, the agenda was posted, you know, last week. It was always a discussion on one-day beer
Right.
wine license.
Yeah, that was an oversight on my part. I thought this
Um,
was part of the process to get the approval, and then just, I thought the paperwork was
Yeah.
just a formality.
Yeah,
But-
for the record, I think this works better. You know,
Yeah.
it's a chance for us to consider what you're asking,
Absolutely.
and then you can come back if you
Yeah.
so choose with
Yeah.
a formal application.
Okay, we will do that.
May I ask a question, something that you brought up about town property and something happening beyond the designated area for the beer? So wouldn't that be the same thing, and I'm just asking, I don't know. So say people were at our parade and they decided to bring their own beverage, and they were in the concert area, and they, you know, came out and was on town property and, you know, tripped, you know, hurt themselves, and decided to sue the town of Sutton. Is that not kind of the same thing?
See, I don't know, because we're the granting authority, we would be the one granting you the right to have the parade. If someone snuck beer in, you know, to me, I see that as being easier to knock out in court, because ultimately they're breaking the law to begin with. They didn't have a right to bring have the open container and whatnot. But if you can allow it to happen, and we are the granting authority that has allowed you to have the parade, then to me, yeah, you could have the whole harmless agreement, but that's still not gonna stop someone from suing us, which means we still have to retain counsel, and we still have to go through the process. We'll win in the long run, hopefully, but you never know.
Would an enhancement to the insurance amount help at all?
Again,
If that would
it's
be
just,
10 million.
it's more the space. Okay, you have it on the church. Where's the distinction between the church parking lot and the town road? Where's the distinction between the church property and the common? Where's the distinction between Polly's and the blacksmith shop? It's not like when it was up at the Celtic Fest, up in the King Farm. They have, what, 200 acres up on the hill? All of that can be contained with limited spillover. All it would take is for someone just to stagger out and trip on the manhole cover out on the road. And again, I'm not saying that adults are irresponsible, but I think it behooves us as elected officials that our primary duty is to look out for the well-being of this town as a whole. So that's only my concern. If we had a bigger facility that you could contain it more efficiently, again, without just being able to cross a line, parking lot to the road, then it would probably ease some of my concerns. But again, deep down inside, I still want to see how you do. Because if we end up here with 300 people, then maybe adding it could help draw the next year. But if you end up with 5,000 people, to John's point, where are we going to put them all? And then you have a couple of beers in them, and then they're trying to get out of the tight spaces, and they're driving down Putnam Hill. You know, I like beer. I'm not saying I don't like beer, and I'm not saying
No
that
one's saying that you
if
don't, no.
there was something like this that I wouldn't partake myself. I'm not a teetotaler by any means. But again, my concern ultimately is for the well-being of the community as a whole. And there's just too many unknowns. So if you come back to us next year after having a successful parade, and you're able to say, we did this right, or we did this wrong, and we're gonna try changing it, then that would help maybe sway my opinion. But at least right now, I just don't know. And I can't take the risk. I wouldn't take the risk if it was my own house, and I definitely can't take the risk as an individual on a member of this board with the well-being of the town at stake.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
Yeah.
Just for everyone to ponder in the interim. How does this potential one-day license differ from the other one-day licenses we've granted? There's still town property that people are driving on. I mean, that's something I think to think about is,
Well, there's
How is it
200 people
distinguishable?
that go to the chicken barbecue, 200 people versus 3,000. That's a big difference to me.
You know, my opinion on that particular question is that the one-day licenses that we grant typically are kind of closed events
smaller scale.
and smaller scale and controlled from the nature of just that element, that it's not, this is really a sort of a town-wide event where you hope to have everybody show up and then a flow of people sort of going everywhere by design. And so it's just, for me, it's just an issue of understanding kind of what the control is gonna look like and just the reaction of the people. I don't know.
A small point I'd like to make is that we're gonna have a limited amount of beer that is not a function of the crowd size. We're gonna have servings for X number of people, whether there's 1,000 people or 5,000 people. The number of people served will be the same. And we would plan this around that amount that we had to serve. So the crowd size itself, I think, as I say, is a separate function of this. It's not gonna impact.
So, I mean, to be really truthful with you, all things being equal, I don't mind the idea of beer, you know, at the event. This, I think we've all said it, we want you to be successful. And, you know, if at some point the decision is that the beer is helpful for you to be successful, then it's an idea that I can warm up to. I think Wendy made some points that I agree with, that you know, this is not, it's new to us, and it's new to the concept of doing this in a public area is new to us. But it's the kind of thing that gets done from you know, in various places, and knowing how to control it is probably something you can convince me we could do. But I'm still at that point where I have two things to say about it. One is, it is a brand-new event, and there is a lot that goes into it, and you know, I would just feel better to see it sort of run once and see how it goes. And you know, and to be honest with you, I guess this is how I feel. It is, I said it before, it's a wedge issue for this board, and we're really trying to be supportive. So I'm just uncomfortable with the idea of having a wedge issue here when we're all trying to make it work.
As are we. I mean, it's, I feel that. I am the same way. I've been on the fence about this myself. I think it's a great thing to do, but there is a lot tied to this. It's a big responsibility, and it makes me nervous doing it, but I think if it's done properly, I mean, if we're gonna do it, as I say, we're very willing to work with you guys and do it, if there's a right way to do this, let this be an example for future events. Let's do this the right way and set a standard for everybody else on how to do this properly. I think we're all intelligent people here. I think we can get our heads together and pull this off. I really do. So.
Well, speaking for you, if I may, it sounds to me like you're saying you're uncomfortable with it, but you think it's important enough that you bring it here anyway.
I wouldn't say uncomfortable is the right word. I respect the responsibility that is attached to this. It's, there are things that can go wrong. No, nobody's saying there isn't. Over-serving people is a problem. But that's why we are taking steps to mitigate that, working with people that we are familiar with, that share our concern that this is pulled off properly. As I said earlier, we have a lower standard for shutting people off. It's, the concern is safety. Safety is number one. And that is the approach we're taking to this. I'm comfortable myself. I mean, this has my name all over it. I don't want this to go south. I really don't. I want this to be a fun event. I don't want any negative action at this event. And I want to see to it that that doesn't happen. And I fully understand what can happen when people are overserved. It destroys the event for everybody. Nobody wants to be next to an obnoxious drunk guy, hooting and hollering at some show. That's not what we want. This is just as I keep trying to stress, we want to just keep this sort of small, a nice add-on to the whole event. It's not the primary entertainment at this event. So.
Or focus.
Or, right.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I have another question.
Yeah,
I'm just interested, Jim, if you've had any conversations with Chief Toll about this and if he has any concerns.
I don't think I have, to be honest. I mean, we've talked about.
I have spoken with them.
We have talked about the details for the overall event, not about the beer and wine tent, or whatever, beer tent. So.
I mean, that would be something that I'd be interested in, is his point of view on this, taking into account all the aspects of the things that he's concerned about and what that adds to, his overall point of view about it. And another point that I want to make too is that if you do decide to come forward, whoever the party is, whether it's the church or the owner of the Polly's, is that I'd like them to be here so we can make sure that they understand the scope and the scale of what they're kind of endeavoring in, and also get their point of view on this as well.
Absolutely. I did speak to Chief Toll. He was one of the first people I spoke to on this to bounce it off of him. And I think, I won't speak for him here, but I think you should speak to him. I think you'll find that he is in support. So.
Thank you, Mr.
if I may, as chairman, we've listened to your presentation a couple weeks ago, and now we've had a detailed presentation tonight, just strictly pretty much on the venue that's at hand is the alcohol. And with this board here, it kind of gives you some direction as the 4th of July parade committee to either go forward or not forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to bring this up to a vote with all of us tonight, so it would give some direction to them on what to do next.
So the motion would basically be to approve a one-day beer license for the 4th of July committee. The site at this point is unknown.
Unknown. But Lisa gives the
As I
committee
said,
some
I'm
direction.
90% sure it would be at the church parking lot. So unless there was some reason not to do it there, we would use Polly's as a
Is
backup.
How could we
Yeah.
approve
If we don't know
with
the
no
location.
site?
Yeah, well, we don't have an application.
I don't even like that.
Well, I mean, I can fill this out. Next time we come here, we don't have to have this lengthy discussion. I think it'll be, you'll have time to think about it. And I want everyone to have time to think about it. I'd prefer to do it this way. Think about it for the next 2 weeks, and we can come before you.
So you'll be back on the 21st?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've provided some direction.
Everyone's happy with that?
May I
We're
ask,
gonna
is
have
there-
a vote on the 21st.
Is there anything else that you'd like to, for us to research, to provide any more that we can do to make things more comfortable. More insurance, as I said, more, we just want to come next time being
Well,
as
I
prepared as
guess
possible.
we should have the gentleman from Polly's Antiques here, and he should be here, it's his property, and we should have representatives from the church here,
Okay.
and to explain
What
that.
about Wormtown, the brewery? Would that help or hinder
You know,
anything?
maybe the one thing that I would ask for is if you anticipate, or if your intention is to limit the quantities served, that maybe you could have some detailed information about that.
Okay,
Absolutely.
fair enough. And if anything pops in your heads over the next 2 weeks, let me know. Wendy certainly knows how to get in touch with me. You know, I'm willing to discuss this and answer any questions in between then. So,
Okay, thank you for
Thank
coming
you.
in.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next would be the Sutton Housing Needs Study. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to turn it over to Jen Hager, who's run this from the start, and I think she has some representatives from CMRPC to join her.
Yield this chair to one of you in a minute.
It should be a relatively quick presentation.
Are you part of it? You want to get a chair? Is there
Yes,
a
I'm
chair
gonna
over
move in a minute because they're gonna do all the talking after 2 seconds with Jen, okay?
2 seconds.
Wait a minute.
2 seconds.
there? That's possible?
Sounded kinda weird, but okay.
Looks like we're getting a podcast, I don't know.
Yeah, that could be, yeah. All right, so this process that representatives from Central Mass Regional Planning are gonna run through for you tonight, with so much of what we do in the planning office and on the planning board springs from the last master plan, and specifically from the goals and objectives from the housing section of that plan. There were 5 strategies, one overarching goal, which is to encourage the development of housing that meets the variety of needs of Sutton's residents, and a number of objectives to kind of support that goal, and then specific strategies. This housing study and plan will meet 5 of those 6 strategies and/or be the first step in completing 5 of the 6 strategies recommended by the 2012 master plan. So a significant step in achieving and really looking at kind of what we have for housing, what we have for demographics, and mismatches that happen between both age demographics, income demographics, and what we have for available housing in this town. So, to that end, I'm going to turn things over to Emily and Ron from CMRPC, who were hired, and they can talk about just briefly the grant that we achieved to get this work done. And they can take you through the results of all the work and the surveys and all of that stuff. So, there you go. Okay, the presentation here.
I'm sorry, can you just give us your names again real quick?
Emily and
And
Ron.
thank you. Here, it's going.
It's warming up. Okay, I just want to start with a little background on this project. So this started, we received a grant from the Massachusetts Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, EEA for short, to complete this residential housing needs study. The components of this project include building a housing needs assessment, establishing a housing needs working group, who we were working with over the past year, and assistance in implementing zoning changes. So the Sutton Housing Task Force consisted of, I believe it was 4 members from the community, and we met pretty regularly, about once a month it ended up being, as well as with Jen, and it was myself and Ron. So it was a really collaborative effort on this. We did multiple public outreach efforts. There was a public forum held back in September. We had 2 sessions
one in the afternoon and one in the evening to accommodate different schedules. So we had over 30 participants from the community attend those sessions. And we also did a community survey in which we received over 300 responses, which is great. And then, so then the final part of this is the residential housing needs recommendations report, which combines the housing needs assessment, general data on the housing market of the town, demographics, and combined with like an implementation matrix and recommendations for moving forward with housing policy and regulations in the town. So overall, the major goals that we wanted to see achieved in this study were to produce the comprehensive housing plan, which can be submitted to the Department of Housing and Community Development, DHCD, as well as to identify a meaningful bylaw, policy, or other goals that could be passed at town meeting, and to help Sutton attain what is called safe harbor status under Chapter 40B. So if you're familiar with Chapter 40B, it requires that towns, communities in Massachusetts maintain 10% of their housing stock as affordable. If a town has less than that 10% defined as affordable, then a developer is able to apply for a comprehensive permit, in which if they include, I believe, 20% of the units in their proposed development as affordable, they are able to gain that permit. So I just want to go over quickly what is and what is not affordable housing. So this can be misconstrued a lot. Chapter 40B affordable housing is not the same as Section 8 housing. It's not what people often envision as high-rise apartments. There's also this association that it is a driver of lower property values. There are studies that can confirm that it does not have a negative impact on property values in a community. What Chapter 40B affordable housing is for those individuals or families that are earning 80% or less of the area median income qualify for affordable housing. So the AMI that Sutton is included in is $68,000 per year for household income for a family of 4. So 80% of that would be, I believe, what did I have here? 54,000. Think about that. Yes, 54,000. So families of 4 making less than that would qualify for affordable housing. So I think that's a really important thing to note when we're talking about this.
So I'm going, again, this is Ron Barron, Associate Planner with CMRPC. I've helped Emily on this since we got the grant written last year. I did a lot of the data collection and analysis part of it, so I was going to talk a little bit about, we only have 1 or 2 slides that has any data points on it, so we're going to try not to bombard you with too much information all at once. What this slide is trying to get at is trying to make an argument for why a town like Sutton can use more affordable housing. As you can see in the chart on the left, this represents the number of housing units that were produced since 2000. Before 2008, you can see that there was the town was producing housing units at a steady clip, and since then it really has sort of cratered. Interestingly enough, the town has had a slightly better rebound period after the recession than a lot of communities. Most communities sort of hit that recession point and it just flatlines with housing production. But you're not producing housing units of any kind, and this isn't just affordable housing units, this is all housing units, nearly at the rate that you were back in 2000, 2001. And with the types of population pressures that we're seeing, that's something that the town ought to be concerned with. Of that housing stock, 82% of it is single-family housing. There are no large-scale multifamily units. We have access to a service called CoStar, which is a database for commercial properties. It listed, I think, one apartment over 4 units in the immediate vicinity. So there's a large dearth of those kinds of apartments. Now, that doesn't necessarily take into account people who might be renting a single-family home or any kind of other arrangement that might be happening. We found that the town has an rapidly aging population. You can see from the median age has increased from 36.5 to 44.8 between 2000 and 2017. We anticipate that's going to continue to go up, and that's slightly higher than the regional average. Now, the region as a whole, aside from the city of Worcester, basically every town here, you're seeing that upward trend. But this is still higher than a lot of the communities that are in the outer ring suburb of Worcester. We're seeing now that 39% of the residents in the town are age 50 plus. This is an increase since 2010. And there are fewer options for older residents seeking to age in place. And what we really mean by that is someone wants to move out of their house. They feel like they can't maintain the large property that they have right now. They want to get something smaller. The number of condos, the number of affordable units, and especially for people on a fixed income, there's very, very limited resources that are available. Right now, the subsidized housing inventory is what this is looking at. That's the way that the DHCD measures this. Is every deed restricted unit in town is sent to them, and they record it in their subsidized housing inventory. And that's when we talk about that 10% number, that's what we're counting. Right now, the town is at 1.5%, or around 50 units that are in that. And that number is going to change dramatically because that's based on census year, total housing units. So this is counting 1.5% of the housing units you had in 2010. As soon as 2020 comes along, if you don't build any housing units, that number is going to drop dramatically. And then the last stat there is regarding cost burden residents. A cost burden resident is, this is a measure that HUD uses, and this basically measures anybody who's spending more than 30% of their total income on housing. And we found that 13% of homeowners in town were cost burden, and 12% of renters are cost burden. What's not on here that I think is important to discuss as well is that Sutton is obviously not in a bubble. The population and development pressures that are being felt by the town of Sutton are being felt everywhere. And eventually, these pressures are going to have an impact on the town. And one of the things that this housing plan tries to do is it tries to get the town into a pipeline where they have the ability to work with DHCD, and if you have a 40B that comes along, somebody tries to get a comprehensive permit and builds the type of apartment that you don't want, but you can't really do anything about it. If you have a plan in place and you're meeting some of your objectives of the plan, then you have the ability to work with, and this is what we mean by the safe harbor requirements. You're able to get into what they call the safe harbor, which allows you to have some control. You can even just say no. You can have a lot more leverage on these types of developments if they happen. And with your proximity to Grafton, your proximity to some of these other Auburn, these towns that are growing very quickly because you're getting all this spillover from housing pressure in Worcester, that's pressure that we anticipate that Sutton's going to feel. If it's not feeling it right now, you're going to be feeling it very soon because new housing units have to come online to accommodate the population of the region. So this is just going over very quickly what the structure of the recommendation reports looks like. This is just what you guys have. We worked on the housing needs assessment, which was looking at all of the demographic trends that we talked about and the housing supply characteristics. We also, in the report, looked at some of the market characteristics. We know that the sale price for houses has been going through the roof. We know that the numbers that you're actually producing have been plummeting. We know that the vacancy rates are extremely low. All of that indicates that demand is very, very high for houses in Sutton, which again puts pressure on developers to, it makes it a more attractive place to build, especially when you guys have access to 146, access to highways and all of the infrastructure ability that you have. We also broke down an assessment of the housing challenges that you face. We looked at the regulatory constraints, basically your zoning, permitting, et cetera. And the main, set up the housing production goals, which was based on input from the committee and from the community outreach that we did. And finally, we have a series of strategies and recommendations that we make. Now, these are not necessarily hard and fast things. We don't say, yeah, you have to do X, Y, and Z in order to do it. But we have recommendations in zoning. We have recommendations for capacity building and different steps that you can take in order to achieve some of the goals that we're looking at. And the last slide I'm going to talk about is what we mean when we talk about housing production goals. This little table just shows what the gap is for being 40 compliant with Chapter 40B. Right now, your 40B inventory, the subsidized housing inventory is 50 units. 10% of your 2010 total year-round homes would be 332 units is what you would need to get to 10%. Now, in order to be considered compliant with this, the only thing you have to do in order to get that safe harbor status, the only thing a town has to do is they have to have an approved housing production plan in place, and you have to be demonstrating that you're producing 0.5% of your stated goal per year. So by this estimate, you would be 17 units per year. You do that in a single calendar year, and that would make you compliant, and that would make you eligible for safe harbor status, give you more control over the types of developments that come down the line. You can also, in the 1% per year is 33 units, it's just to give you a framework for what kind of unit production you'd be looking at.
Okay, so moving forward with the next steps, we hope to submit a housing plan to the DHCD, and once hopefully they approve this plan and it is locally adopted by the Board of Selectmen, it just has to be combined, like Ron said, with the 0.5% of growth of the town's affordable housing production per year, or 1% growth over 2 years, to be able to claim safe harbor status and have the ability to deny a developer a comprehensive permit. This plan's also intended to be like a housing policy guide for Sutton moving forward. There's a lot of other recommendations in there. I encourage you to look at the implementation matrix that I believe was included in the plan. Great recommendations for the town in terms of housing. And the next would be also zoning bylaw implementation at the next fall town meeting. Jen has written a cottage housing bylaw, and there's also hopefully some amendments to existing bylaws that will encourage more opportunities to develop affordable housing units. So that's what we're looking forward to in the next coming months with this plan. So if Jen would like to talk any more about this too, she's welcome to.
So the thing I want to stress is you've heard a lot about 40B, you've heard a lot about Safe Harbor, and seen those numbers. They're pretty significant numbers. We are way out of whack with the 40B goals at the state level. We're short 282 units. We're not going to be developing that many units anytime soon. Even 0.5% at 17 units a year is a pretty high goal for a town the size of Sutton with limited water and sewer infrastructure and the like. This is kind of a reality check to kind of let the town and the townspeople know where you are in relation to your exposure under the 40B regulations. But also, and I think almost more importantly, it's a 51-page housing study with recommendations that includes a lot of demographics and gives you factual demographics on the mismatch between the aging community and the types of housing available, not just for people as they age, as was mentioned, to downsize into something they can actually afford to stay in their own community, but also for young professionals. As you know, one of the goals of the planning department is to really develop new business, to encourage local services like restaurants. Those things don't happen without workforce. Those things don't happen without young professionals to work in those businesses in close proximity. So I'm hoping what you'll take out of this is not only the cautionary tale of 40B and realizing that we're so way out of whack with that if a unfriendly 40B project came forward that really wasn't what you wanted to see in the town, we are very exposed. And you need to know that, and you need to realize that. And we are working, and you will see us put forward bylaws to work towards including affordable units, making our bylaws more inclusionary, requiring affordable units productions in a lot of the development we do in town, so we can gain some ground there and hopefully gain some protection. But so much more importantly was from the Housing Committee that included members like Wally Baker from the Planning Board, Jim Moran from the Zoning Board, Chris Matera, Citizen at Large, Michelle Edelstein from the Senior Center, people who kind of represented a kind of diverse groups and different boards, was that the Board of Selectmen as policy setting board, and residents as a whole, as they have access to this and look at this, really start to think about not just where they are, maybe in their comfortable single-family home at age 45 or 55, but where they want to age in place and where they want their kids to live as they become adults. Do they want an opportunity for them to stay in this town? Do they want an opportunity to age in place, not in this big house they have? And to really think about that housing is not just about where you live, but it drives a lot of other things in your community. It drives economic development. It drives companies that want to look in your community and be in your community. And it also drives things like the local services, i.e. restaurants, housing numbers, density, a wide range of residents, age is in the area, drive things like restaurants and grocery stores and the like. So trying to kind of pull that all into a big plan, make you all kind of think deeply, and let you know as you start to see things roll out of this, this is where it came from. And it's very factual. CMRPC has done an awesome job, as they always do, of really collecting the facts, laying it out nice and clean, and giving you something to really think about.
Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I know that was a lot of information, so I'm sure I'm sure there's questions.
Dave?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, so that was dense. There's a lot you just dropped on us. But Jen, at the end there, you touched on some things I think about when I read this stuff, right? Is I always say, like, I don't think my kids could ever afford to live in Sutton. So, from that perspective, it's a concern. But you also touched on the other thing that I looked at, with the number of housing units we're producing today, even 17 units to add to that, that's it's 20 to 30% of the new housing units that get created have to be affordable under this definition to mitigate the risk that we have on the 40B stuff. And since a large number of those are single-family units, it just doesn't come off as a thing that's sort of achievable, if you will, in that sense.
Right, I mean, safe harbor, I think, is a big fat stretch in a town like Sutton at the numbers we're producing. So it's important that you understand the exposure there. And that if an unfriendly 40B rolls into town tomorrow, you better be ready. I'll be ready to negotiate it as best I can. But you need to know, as the policymakers in the town, that it's a huge exposure. That's not to say we throw our hands up, but what you're gonna see rolling out of this is partly because of the exposure there that we'd like to try to at least get at if we can, and the fact that it's a good policy. There's a reason why you want affordable housing in your communities. That we'll be working on that percentage regardless of the fact that it's a far stretch for us to reach safe harbor. But you need to know about it.
Okay, fair enough.
So, I mean, it's very important that you know that's a risk that is a reality that could come in your direction, and that's one of the driving factors towards working on housing and working on production of affordable housing in our town.
But some of the stats that were in the report to me are almost like counterintuitive, if you will, or send you in the opposite direction of what we're trying to achieve. So, I'm curious that our housing production has gone down recently, and yet the demand, we're saying, is way up. And so those things are kind of incongruous to me. Like, why wouldn't our housing production be up if demand is growing so greatly?
Well, the biggest driver for that is the cost of delivering new housing. The cost of just building a house has gone from, I want to say, as much as 88% in this region nationwide, and even more in this region since 2000. I remember in 2000, I want to say it was 2002 or 2003, I was in California and I was an insurance adjuster at the time. And I was looking at, we were looking at rebuilding a house out in California when the housing market was already insane to begin with. It was like $100,000 to build a house out there. And that would be a bargain compared to what people do right now.
So what are the alternatives, though? If people, they can't build here because they can't afford it, so they move 50 miles out or something like that, where the housing costs are less, or the building costs are less?
And that will happen eventually. Right now, what we're seeing is that we are pushing up to the upper limits of what the credit market is going to bear, and people are taking more and more and more out to fund staying in this state and in this region. The number of people that are cost burdened is just going through the roof. There's places, we were just working in Worcester, and there's parts of Worcester that never had any problems with cost burdened households that now have 60-70% of their population paying as much as 50% of their income on housing. And that's what we're seeing. Eventually, there's going to be an upper limit to how much that can sustain, but I'm not sure what is going to happen when we hit that wall.
And you take my kids as an example. They all are living with massive amounts of college debt, so their ability to carry those kind of burdens are even less. And so what I wonder about is, as I age, as all of us age, and begin to age out of our homes, what's the market behind? I wonder how much of this becomes self-correcting because of the market conditions that you kind of allude to. One of the things we're seeing in our schools is that our population is actually declining and not increasing. And that, to me, all of those kind of thoughts lead me to think that, in fact, you might see the population tend to want to decline. I know that as the population declines, or if the population were to decline, that would tend to reduce the cost pressure on housing, which would invite more people in, so, it kind of maybe balances itself out. But, as we get older, it just feels like that turnover would start to create, some additional availability of housing.
Yeah, it will create availability and some price reduction, though not at the clip you're thinking necessarily, for new people to move into your community potentially. But again, even if Sutton's average housing prices decrease a little bit, those aren't first-time home buyer houses. They're just not. 82% of the homes in this town are single-family homes, and most of them are significantly sized and significantly priced. The biggest problem here in Sutton is the lack of diversity in those housing types. Seniors as they age, or many seniors as they age, and young professionals, they don't want the 10-acre lot with the 3,000 square foot house. That is not where things are going. They don't even want the 1.5-acre lot with the 2,500 square foot house. That's not where the market's going. So one of the biggest problems in Sutton is, maybe you free up some housing as the population drops off, but it's not housing young professionals can afford. It's not housing that seniors aging in the community want to keep and maintain, and it won't drop in half. It won't drop even, you won't even lose 30%. And at our average housing numbers here in town, that's not going to make a depreciable difference in the high and the low end, in the young professional side of things that we're not serving, and in the aging population that we're not serving. If you are a well-earning couple with 2, 3 kids, you've got everything you need in Sutton, if you're really well earning. If you're not that, you don't have what you need here. You just don't. And that's a choice. That's part of the reason you're sitting in front of a policy board is to have that discussion. Maybe that's what you want. But part of this is realizing that if that's what the community wants as a whole, that type of housing and that type of forcing out this end and this end will have an effect on business creation, local service creation, restaurants, retail. It has a ripple effect.
So last question or comment, I'm not sure what it is. So I guess I'm curious to see what kind of policies we might develop to counterbalance this, because I guess what I see as the challenge is that you may want to encourage people to build more affordable housing, but where we're building so little as it is, it seems to me when a parcel opens up and it's available to be built on, that the inclination, because the market values would support it, would be to build the larger, potentially more profitable dwelling.
So let's have the density discussion. All right, so the deal is, and I mean, there's too many smart people sitting up there, so I'm not gonna try to slide something by you. Affordable housing, it either has to, it's gotta work for the builder. Any housing you develop has to work for the builder. So you're either building a really expensive house where they're making a nice chunk, or you're building more smaller houses where they're making the same chunk. So the goal from the planning side of things, after being here for over 20 years, is I've picked up that in Sutton, we might want to achieve these goals. These might be worthy goals, but we need to work on a way to achieve these goals and still be in keeping with the character of the community. So, which is why, you know, I have been traveling to cottage communities and different kinds of communities all over the state, in Connecticut and Rhode Island, kind of researching these things. That's why my very last paper, before I actually finally finished that degree in 2014, was kind of a thesis on cottage housing and affordable housing that produced the bylaw you'll see in the fall, after we shine it up with the planning board and get some more input there through some public forums. That we can do this. We can move towards meeting the needs of seniors who already live here, and young people who might want to stay here, and the people in between who live comfortably here but might want a restaurant in town, might want a business, more businesses like Prime Metals, like IVA, like Atlas Box, who want to be closer to their workforce. And some companies who actually need that, who won't locate if they're more than a few miles from X% of their potential workforce. So, you know, these initiatives aren't something that will just serve the high and the low end of the demographic age scale. They actually, if done correctly, can help benefit the entire range of the population within Sutton and bring services and benefits to everyone.
And if I may just add, you know, one of the things that we looked at was how the existing zoning actually ends up impacting the types of houses that you can end up building here. And we have some recommendations in the report that see very subtle changes. Like, for instance, you know, you've got your village district, you've got the Manchawag district. We have all of these little, these old workforce housing units on very small parcels. None of those would be legal to build right now. And we say in the report that this is something that you might be able to do, because when you think about the cost of housing, you tend to think the materials is a huge driver, and it is a huge driver. That cost has gone up. But also, housing is such a highly regulated area. There's so many restrictions to what a person can do in order to build their house. And some of what we're trying to do is say, well, where can we go to what was here before, what kind of houses were here beforehand, and what were the dimensional requirements that you had to build those houses? How can we get closer to that pattern in areas where it's appropriate, where people are comfortable with it? And one of the things we did is we did an exercise at the community outreach meeting that we did, where we had a map and we asked people, show us different housing types. Where in town would you find this the most appropriate? And those are the places where we targeted those recommendations, was in the villages for smaller houses, over by 146 for slightly larger apartments, things of that nature. And we have some recommendations in here that talk about trying to see if you're gonna do bigger apartments, do a more comprehensive study than we did in here that figured out exactly where it would be appropriate, where you could sustain it, and where it would have the least impact on the character of the town. And those have been sort of our guiding principles on this.
Yeah, one of the good things is we're at 1.5%. We're way behind the curve on producing affordable housing. The good news about that is there's so many communities that are doing it and doing it well. So we have really great examples of out there, communities our size, communities with our kind of historic nature that have produced larger unit developments or multi-building, slightly smaller unit developments, and they've done it well. And what I'm finding in the planning department is there is a desire out there for developers, if they can trade out the build 10 big homes, instead give me 20 to 30 smaller homes, I'm gonna make the same profit, and you guys want this, and I know there's a market for this, and we have demographics up the wazoo to show there's a market for this, I'll build this. And if you, and so part of this is making the community aware of it, kind of getting the community on board with it, working on some regulations that work for everybody. And that itself, doing those things, lays out the welcome mat for the developers who we know out there, who we know already do it well, and do it with an eye towards the community that they're locating in. So it's all kind of a process, the building blocks to get where you want to go in the town of Sutton, which isn't the town of Framingham, which isn't the, you know, we are a unique community. We can accomplish these goals at a much slower rate than many other communities, unfortunately, but we can do it in a way that's appropriate with the community, with a little free thinking and some assistance from our friends, and we can do it well.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be honest with you, I don't really have much to say. I know it's coming, I know it's inevitable, I know it's something that we're gonna be in the position one day that if we don't do or take action, that it's gonna be forced upon us. So ultimately, and this is gonna sound odd, I'm gonna look forward to whatever recommendations planning has before us, and I'll reserve judgment until then. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have one quick question because I really want to take the time to read this whole report and process it in my own head. But my one question was, the Council on Aging had come before us and we realize it's a rapidly aging community. If we were to develop over 55 housing, would those units count toward that number?
You want to take this or should I?
Sorry, did I open a
Yeah.
Pandora's box
We had a
there?
nice
Answer is no.
discussion on this last week.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Well, Jim summed it right up in
Yes
2
and
letters.
No.
No, yes and no.
Okay.
The way our bylaw is currently worded, because of one sentence in the bylaw in particular, nope. So we'll be changing that sentence come fall town meeting with the support of the planning board after due discussion. Basically, DHCD has put out a policy, and they restated it last February, that said, if you have over 55 housing bylaw, which of course we do, that is the Wedgwood development that's in the public hearing on the end of Armsby right now is an over 55. You can do over 55, and we require a minimum of 10% of affordable in those developments, so we never lose ground. That if you specifically exclude children, individuals under the age of 18, if you have a sentence in your bylaw, which we do right now, that says nobody under the age of 18 can live there for more than 2 weeks at a time, they will not count those units in their inventory.
So assuming it's deemed prudent to make that change,
Right.
we would be well on our way to meeting that goal if that over 55 development was approved under the new regulations.
Yeah, we would make a big hit. They are currently, they came in with 10. I did work with them before they filed and said, look, we're glad we're not gonna lose ground, but we really wanna gain ground with you. So give me 12%, give me 13%, I actually asked for 15. So, I've got them at 12 to 13% right now. It's only an extra unit or two, but it's a gain.
Sure.
What I'm doing right now, because anything I do, I think you need data. I think you need to give people real data, is collecting data to show the community that while we would eliminate that sentence, which would allow us to count these units in over 55 developments, that there's no need to be scared about school numbers going insane, because we have 3 condominium developments right now that are not age restricted, that are restricted in that they're 1 and 2 bedroom units. And so I'm collecting and will be showing the planning board and whoever else in forums the data that the number of bedrooms in particular has restricted significantly the number of children that live in those developments at any one time. So when you have 1 and 2 bedroom developments, they're almost self-restricting in the number of child production. And then of course, this community would actually be marketed as an over 55, and it will still have a requirement that at least one individual in that household has to be a minimum of 55 years old. So could a grandparent have a grandchild? Absolutely. If a grandparent was left a grandchild and was raising them, they could live there. But there's not gonna be 90 units of grandparents raising grandchildren.
Okay, I appreciate that, because it will help me put everything into perspective, so. Okay, that's just my only question for tonight, but thank you so much for your efforts. It's incredibly comprehensive.
Jonathan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, this is right up my alley. Feels like stepping back a few months. I think one clarifying question I want to make sure that people understand is that if an unfriendly comes in, they can build within any residential area within town. Is that correct?
Anywhere at any density.
Right. So people need to understand that. So this might pop up in some rural part of town that people love, potential 300 unit, housing unit, which I don't think anybody would want that.
Been that way for a long time.
Yep. So it's just something that I want people to keep in mind. But I think what's even more concerning for me is kind of the affordability for young families and the kind of the aging in place. I'm seeing it on my own road. A lot of the families who are now kind of coming to retirement age are all moving out of town. They don't, and I'm not sure if there was other options if they would stay here, but they're getting tired of taking care of the big properties. And I think conversely on the other side, the demographics of the millennials is they don't want big properties anymore. They want small, like kind of condensed housing. And I know it's great because we're trying to achieve this balance in Sutton. I fully am in that camp as well of, I love the character of the town, but there's also the challenges of if we're losing where people aren't coming into town, there's not new families coming in, and we're losing the older people, we're a dying town. And that may feel good for right now, but also if you start to take it from the macroeconomic standpoint, so that's the microeconomic. At the macroeconomic level, we live in a very expensive region, partly due to regulation and lack of land and all of that. And when you start to take that into account, now you have employers who say, you know what, my employees can't afford to live here, and they start picking up shop. And I've seen that happen. I've seen companies that I've worked for who have, they used to have 5,000 people in Marlboro, and they moved them all to North Carolina and Texas and places like that for cheaper housing for their employees. And that has an impact on us because now people who can afford to live here can't live here anymore because they've got to move. So we can't just look at it in the micro sense of like, this is great for Sutton because we're not growing. I think there's this balance we need to achieve, and I think that's what the planning board's trying to do, is to look at what are the incremental changes that we can make that will achieve that balance that we're looking for that's so important to Sutton. But I mean, I grew up here, and the town is not the same town it was when I was in elementary school here. I mean, many of the farm fields are gone now. The farm field next to me just is now is turning into houses. It's changed. And the most important thing is if you have proper zoning in place, you can kind of mitigate how fast that grows. Because I don't want to become like a town like Franklin or places like that grows so fast. Grafton. Now you've got new schools you've got to build. So there's this kind of achieving this balance that is challenging, but I think Sutton's done a very good job at that. And there's always the kind of unfriendly 40B, which it hasn't happened yet. It could happen, it may not happen, but it's still something. If you look at the kind of the larger issue of this, is that Sutton is not as affordable, and without new families moving in, the town doesn't continue to be dynamic. And without people staying here, we lose people who have committed many years and have a valuable input into the town. And so I think it's just looking at this holistically and trying to find a balance, to balance the town's character and kind of rural feel with the reality that we face and the regulation that we face, which we can ignore it, or we can choose to like put the regulation in place incrementally that puts us in a better position rather than it just being something that just gets foisted on us. And I think we've had other examples like solar and other things that have kind of forced into positions we don't necessarily like being in. And so and that's also based on regulation by the state that's kind of foisted on us as well. So I think this is the right type of approach.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in. I value your report, and we have a lot of faith in our planning department and a lot of our departments, and I'm sure that Sutton's gonna do the right thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just wanted, if I may, just add one thing. I don't know if it was explained that at some point it will be on the board will have to take a vote to adopt the plan. Was that, did Jen explain that to you? Okay.
It was on one of your
Yes, yeah,
slides.
It was on one of the
PowerPoint,
slides.
yeah.
Okay, good. I wanted to make sure that that was clear, that obviously we want you to take the time to digest the report and really get used to it before you make any decision. You don't want to vote on something you haven't fully read. But, all right, just wanted to make sure that was clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron and Emily.
Okay.
It was raining. Knock up.
It's just gonna make it more muggy.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have the Shaw Barn discussion. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This came before me back in April 1. Paul Dunn from the 4-H Club came in with a proposal on utilizing the Shaw Barn for his 4-H club. According to his flyer, which is attached to your packet, they have approximately 20 members and 22 head of livestock. As you know, the Board of Selectmen has been planning on demolition of the Shaw Barn for a couple of years. We talked about it in goals and so forth. To the extent that we put $25,000 in that 2019 capital plan, and we've got an additional $10,000 in this year's capital plan to demolish the barn. So again, we've been talking about it for a couple of years. Part of the reason we've been talking about it is our insurance company no longer insures vacant properties. They just feel there's too much liability in them and they will not insure them. So we had to go outside to identify a third-party insurer. We're currently paying a little over $3,000 a year for that insurance. If the board chooses to lease out this property rather than demolishing it, I'm recommending a few steps be taken before that. If the value of the property is over $35,000, then there's a process that we need to do. We need to go out to bid and we need to do it in a fair process. The value of the property, right now, there's really nothing valuable about the property other than maybe the bricks and stones that hold it up. It's not a post and beam structure, it's just hemlock constructed back in 1944. So I don't know whether it'll meet that $35,000 threshold or not. The 4-H Club has requested a 10-year lease with the option to extend. First of all, I think it's important that if the board decides to hold off on demolition and just lease it out, then I would recommend that we go out to bid regardless if we meet that $35,000 threshold or not, to make it a fair process to everybody that could potentially have interest in this barn, rather than picking out one group in Sutton that has come forward and then giving them a deal and saying, here, you can have it for 10 years and we establish the rent and the liability and everything else. I think the fair process is, because the town has entrusted the Board of Selectmen to run this property, is to make it available to everybody if we're gonna lease it out. The one condition I would have is that we write the RFP, and it will be an RFP, which gives the town more options in selecting, but establish the criteria by which we're looking for. And I think the first is a nonprofit, and then we can decide what other criteria would be involved in that RFP. The 4-H Club has presented an insurance policy for general liability. Obviously, if this is the direction the board chooses to go in, then we'll need to work with the 4-H Club to define that liability insurance. I've had discussions with Dave Labonte from Maya and Cabot Risk. He has some issues with that liability proposal that was presented to the town. But regardless, that's a side item that we can discuss in further depth at a later time. Part of my problem is the club has very few assets, and my concern is if there was an accident, even though we have the town is additionally named, insured, and all the things that we talked about earlier during the 4th of July discussion, the town would, in my opinion, be named in any lawsuit liability, potentially. So if the 4-H Club is successful in winning this bid, then I would recommend a short-term lease. To give that property up for a period of 10 years without any real control over that, I think could be a mistake. We don't know what we're getting into until we're into it. And that barn could fall further in disrepair. The fact is there haven't been any real animals in that building for going on 50 years. Buster Shaw had milking cows in there until the early 1970s, and then he stopped doing that. There have been a couple of cows for the Shaws for personal consumption, but there really has been no animals in there for probably 25 years, give or take. So there are a number of things to consider. I have told Paul Dunn that I appreciate all the work he's done on this proposal. I wish it had come to my attention before we had discussions on, demolishing the barn and doing all the work that we had done and so forth on that route. And now we're in the 11th hour, and probably 30 to 60 days before we're gonna put out an RFP to demolish it, to potentially lease it out. So that's sort of the background on this. But I'm the custodian of properties by the charter, but I felt this was such an important issue, and I think the Board of Selectmen has the say on Shaw Farm. The town gave the board the power to make these decisions, and I just wanted to defer to the Board of Selectmen to give me some direction on this matter. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Before I open up to the members, I'd like to hear from you, Paul, a little bit.
Sure.
And just, if you could, just state your name and everything for the record.
Yep, Paul Dunn. I do run the 4-H Club here in town, but it's not the 4-H Club that I was pitching. We host it there, but I would actually form a new nonprofit, which in my head is called the Sutton Agricultural Center. And it would not be just the 4-H Club. It would be a place where we can offer classes on maple sugaring, keeping beehives, if the facility can develop itself, maybe canning, everything agricultural use, how to make hay here in town. So it would be a separate nonprofit, wouldn't be the actual club itself. The club would maybe pay rent to that entity.
I actually didn't know until 4:30 this afternoon that it was on the docket tonight, so I'm not exactly prepared. Well, to be fair, let me just say that with respect to what you're saying, I wanted to have this general discussion. I didn't know that you were gonna be given the opportunity to speak at this, but it's really a discussion on whether the board wants to lease out the barn or not. Not necessarily to the agricultural center or whatever, but to any nonprofit, or the board wants to look at continued demolition of this property. So that's the policy item that's before the board now. 4-H Club is sort of part of this, but not necessarily the focus of this discussion, in my opinion.
Dave?
Okay. Well, I guess in that spirit, you sort of talked through the things that I would be concerned about. Number one, that's what I feel like. We're just so close to getting this done that the inertia seems like we're just moving toward that. But the specific uses, I guess, my questions would be, how much area around the building are we contemplating? If you're gonna lease it to anybody for a use, then we must be talking about using it for some purpose that's gonna take up more than just that barn area. And then how much impact does that have on the property and the potential uses of that property going forward? There really isn't a lot on it now, but the idea is that we might want to be doing things with that at some point in the future, and I just don't know what impact that would have on, if there'd be interference or sort of,
We've talked preliminarily, again, with Paul and I sitting down, and there are a couple of fields that, that would be potentially available for him and the cows to go out and have a meal. But there are issues with that. If you do that, then you have active trail use in cross-country, and during the fall season, we have a bunch of meets up there, including, a big championship where there's a dual valley, so there's 6 or 7 towns coming to this dual valley championship. And I'm sure in that situation, the cows would be contained, again, we sharing the discussion that you and I had behind an electric fence and away from the runners per se. But then you have, cleanup. The cows obviously leave some messes in the area, and so it's just the compatibility of those two uses. And then you have sort of an issue with the cows behind an electric fence. People go up to that, and Paul talked about having signs up, the fence is electrified. It could be an attractive nuisance, which, carries some liability on its own, and the barn, the structure itself is fairly solid, but it is in disrepair. The top of the barn is unsafe to go into, and there is a fall off area, and I'm sure that could easily be fixed, but that is why we were told by the third-party insurer to board it up, make sure it's secure, there are no open windows, and do not let anybody in there. And right now, it's pretty tightly secured, or you won't get liability insurance from this third party. This wasn't even Maya that we were dealing with. And so we have done all that.
excuse me.
In preparation. So that's what we've been working on. And Matt secured it last fall.
Yeah, I can't say that I've actually looked at the structure, but it's supposed to be in fairly significant disrepair. So it would be a fairly costly thing to rebuild as well.
I would say, from my perspective, you can see the sky through the roof of the barn, and there are a number of issues within that structure. Yet Paul has talked about, you know, building this foundation and raising monies to rehab the facility, rehab the structure, and, you know, it's just what he's presented to me.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm gonna dovetail on Dave's question. Costs. I mean, I can't imagine that a barn would be up to a certain code similar to housing, but what would be the cost to make this usable if it is in the state of disrepair, which would be natural for the sense that it has been basically left open to Mother Nature for 2 decades?
Well, again, you know essentially what I know, short of a discussion that Paul and I have had. You have the same proposal that he presented to me on April 1 in your packet. So
Would that cost be expected to fall upon the town?
no, and you know, whatever agreement we come up with whatever nonprofit wins this bid, we would probably charge rent and assume that the leasee carries more than adequate insurance. You know, according to Dave Labonte, that the policy that Paul presented to me is not adequate insurance. Again, I just talked to Dave Labonte earlier today, so I don't, you know, just was working on this last minute. But
What is there? Is there electricity there?
the
Is there
electricity was
water
cut
there?
off from the pole that's there, so there's no electricity at that barn.
Is their well still usable? Or?
I don't know. The well hasn't been used again in 12 years.
So there's
13 years.
additional costs.
You know, and then the whole upgrading the electricity potentially, if you're gonna put an electric fence in and other kind of electric items. I don't know the condition of the electric feed, the service there, that's at that barn.
And the driveway from Putnam Hill to that point is lengthy.
Yeah, there's some distance there.
Well, it just, the more feet, the more money it costs.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one comment and one quick question. What is the status of the 501c3 now? Have you applied for status yet?
I only downloaded the paperwork. I was waiting to hear some sort of direction from the board before I went through that process.
So if they put it out to bid, I guess, I'm not sure of the timeline that would entail, Jim. I'm just trying to, in my head, figure out if that would give you time to become a nonprofit. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that,
I don't
to be fair with you. And I guess my only concern is too, just looking at the map, the farm trail goes right through the middle of what you're proposing. And that's the
I actually
trail.
think that's an enhancement, actually, but
What's that?
I actually think that's an enhancement. I actually would want people to run through and see what's going on, so.
But where would the cows be located? Because I'm trying to understand where the electric fence would stop and end.
Initially, it would mostly be the field directly behind the barn.
The
and-
hayed field?
No, directly into the woods. There's a area
Yep.
straight behind, and then also the fence in that, that's along the access road heading towards Putnam Road.
So it's a rectangular lot behind the barn.
Yeah, I see that. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this one's a tough one because I love the concept of kind of having an agricultural center in Sutton or some kind of nonprofit potentially use the land because, you know, my question is the land, you know, being utilized now? I know it's being utilized for certain aspects of it, but I know we've had other ideas for that space, and I don't think those things are panning out as far as like a track and field and things like that. So is this a potential for us to kind of live within the spirit of, you know, using this barn? And I always hate to see barns go down. I think one of the concerns I do have, though, is this is a really pretty good sized barn, and obviously the cost for a nonprofit to maintain that. And so, yeah, it's tough because, you know, it's delaying the demolition for the period of time to put together an RFP and to go through that process and continuing to contain that risk, and then nothing pan out from it. That's one risk, and then, yeah, so, I mean, overall, I mean, I like the idea. I think there's a lot of hurdles that you're gonna have to overcome, especially around cost, and especially this is kind of a work in progress plan, and it's not something you've been working on for like a year, you know, and so it's very early in your process. You know, so the aspects I like about it is it utilizes the land and the barn. There is some challenges with cross country, but I think that could be mitigated, or with the use of the trails, I guess is a better word. And then, so that's kind of the positives of it. And then the negative I see is just the overall cost for any nonprofit to maintain that property. It's, if it was a smaller barn, it'd probably be a little more amenable, but this is a pretty good sized barn, so it's just something I think you're gonna have to kind of overcome in your plan, how you'd mitigate that, and raise the money.
Personally, I'm most worried about the water. That worries me the most, is like getting water to the barn again. The power is actually curled up on a pole right diagonally across the street from the barn. Like, not at Putnam Hill, but it actually still comes up the road. And it's really just the skin. It is a roof and a siding. I think the structure is in really good shape. So that's just my quick assessment from what I've been able to observe.
I'd be interested in what is the estimate to get it to a safe place, and also because once a barn's roof goes, that's usually the very quick beginning of an end of a barn. So I'd want to understand, like, what are the true costs, not just kind of, because I don't think it's been open for 10, 20 years, because the barn would be already down if the roof was open that long.
Yeah.
I mean,
to that end, I would obviously want to touch with the board and have permission to go in and take measurements, actually poke around to get that kind of information together. It's not something I can do without
Yeah.
getting in.
Yeah, and then,
Yeah, I know.
all right.
I think the challenge for us as a board is that if somebody wanted to lease this property, that, you can do your own assessment, but at some level, we would have to do our own assessment to ensure that whatever you're doing is up to a standard that is gonna be safe for the town to move forward with it. So, for us, assessing all these costs, with all due respect, we'd also have to assess your ability to maintain those costs, right? That we wouldn't wanna go through this and then a year down the road not have you be able to meet your funding requirements. And if you did all of that and then somehow couldn't pay the lease and you were gone from there, now we've got a building that's maybe been partially rehabbed and all of our plans have changed, so I'm with Jonathan, it's a tough one,
And that's why I brought it to the board, because I was stuck. I thought this was a good proposal by Paul. It definitely made me think about the possibilities, but, in the end, it's the liability is concerning me.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful idea. Don't get me wrong, I think it's great. But the idea versus reality, and if you were organized, if you had accounts, if you had all of the stuff already in place, that may alleviate some of my concerns about making a reality. I just don't know. And then if we put it out to bid, who knows what we could get in? Someone might beat Paul, and so I don't know. It's a tough one.
Would there be harm in waiting to the end of the summer?
Listen, this is really, I've kind of deferred to the board on getting some direction here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
last, but here I am. The barn was built before 1938, and then in the 1938 hurricane, it had considerable damage. And then from local lumber in Sutton, which was hemlock, a very low-grade lumber, it was rebuilt. The last time, it was a dairy farm, as some of this you've already heard, but was used by Buster Shaw in the early 1970s. Electricity was cut to the property approximately 12 years ago. And just recently, we had the town assessor's office go out and assess the barn. And it was a very low assessment on the property. One of the questions is before you, and it's not you, Paul.
I got it.
I understand, please believe me, it's anyone that is gonna be interested if we're gonna do an RFP. I believe you'd like to see the town in good faith appropriated $25,000 towards demolition. And now in this year's town meeting, under the capital plan, we have another 10,000. And quite frankly, unless I'm going the wrong way, I'm pretty much sure that this property was gonna be demolished.
Mhm.
And now you come in, or anyone else comes in. It's not like we had the Manchog Library, and that went out to RFP, and we have a sustaining early learning center down there. But it has water, it has sewer, it has a building that's been all done over and accepted with the heating and everything with our building commissioner, and a high-end insurance, and we've leased that property for so many years. But I believe, Paul, if it was you, like Jim said, there's not many assets, there's not much money to start this program here. And I believe you'd want to take from what I'm hearing, you wanted to take the 25,000 and put towards that program?
I put it out there as an option, yes.
Yeah, well, I have troubles with that, to be quite frank with you. I have problems with having 20 cows there without a person a caretaker on the property. I have troubles with the fences being electrified because people are nosy, and people come in to use the trails and everything else, and with young kids and everything, they want to go see the cows or what it is. But just the building and the water and the sewer and everything that's there, I just have problems with it. And I think at this time, it's unsafe, and I would recommend that we have a vote here tonight to what we're gonna do. Jim?
I'm fine with that. If the board wants to make a motion and make it, give me clear direction on which way the board would like me to go, then I'd appreciate that, because this one was tough.
Just give us a minute, we'll write up a motion.
Something like that?
Yeah.
I think you're fine.
All right. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to go forward with the stated goal of the Board of Selectmen of demolishing the barn at Shaw Farm property, and thereby, we'll just leave it at that.
Can you read that again?
I'd like to make a motion to go forward with the stated goal of the Board of Selectmen of demolishing the barn at Shaw Farm property.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
How did you vote? I didn't see you. I was
I
looking.
said aye.
Aye.
Yes.
As to demolish it?
Demolish.
So the vote is 4-1 to demolish it.
I have a quick follow-up question, if I could. Would it be possible to, after it's demolished, to approach the board again with a similar, but maybe smaller scaled idea for the property?
At the site?
Yeah.
You can,
There's no prohibition.
you
Yeah.
can always come
Proposing
forward with it.
anything,
yeah. Okay.
Sure. Absolutely.
Could I, Mr. Chairman? I'd just like to make a suggestion.
Mhm.
Make sure everything's in place first. Because if we could see that you're organized, if we could see that you have the money, and you have the means to go forward with the plan, you know, that's ultimately what would sway me in the end. Because again, there's just gonna be, even going forward and building a new facility, smaller facility, as you said, there's electricity, there's the water, real live things. So, if you could come before us with that, I know I would look at it favorably.
I mean, we could give you access to the property, and so you can get the water tested, that you can, you know, talk to National Grid on the electric and so forth. You know, so that's not a major issue. You can get all the information that you need.
Yeah,
Thank you for coming in.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next would be the town manager's update. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Town meeting is next Monday, May 13th at 7 PM in the middle school, high school auditorium. That meeting begins promptly at 7. Prime Metals Technology groundbreaking was held Wednesday, April 24th at 10 a.m. John Hebert and Chairman John Hebert and Vice Chairman David Hall spoke during the ceremonies. The CEO of Prime Metals and the CEO of the American operations for Prime Metals both spoke at the event. The scheduled opening of this facility is planned for March 2020. So really quick construction of this facility, and they hope to be up and in that facility in less than a year. So that's terrific. Memorial Day Parade will be held Monday, May 27th. And the board is fairly familiar with the operations of that. The parade begins promptly at 11 a.m. and it's recommended that the board be at Town Hall at 10:30 a.m. to, you know, participate in the operation, the ceremonies on the Common behind Town Hall. I'm assuming there'll still be the opportunity to ride on the bus for the board. I haven't spoken to Dave Karasias, but I'm assuming that event, that possibility still exists for the board members. Election Day will be held on Tuesday, May 28th, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. in all 3 precincts. Just a reminder, Precinct 1 and Precinct 3 both vote in the middle school gymnasium, as they have in the past few years. Sibley Reservoir Dam. The State Office of Dam Safety is looking to breach the Sibley Dam due to a collapsed discharge pipe in the lower part of the dam structure. The owners of the dam, the Dankos, they are supportive of breaching the dam. We are working with dam safety. I've had a number of conversations with the director, Bill Saloma, on how we're going to deal with this and how we're going to discharge the water so as not to impact Free Grace Marble Farm and other historical structures in that area. So right now they've got a pump on top of that dam, pumping the water over at a slow rate into the normal discharge areas. The collapsed pipe obviously stopped allowing water to flow freely, and therefore the impoundment has continued with all the rain, and that water level has built up to now probably 3 or 4 feet. So it's becoming an issue, and that's an earthen dam, so you want to make sure that not too much water is being impounded, or we could have a bigger issue. So the state has declared this an emergency. They are fully in control of this. The town has very little say in this. The Conservation Commission is also supportive of the state action. So we are working closely. We have communicated by email and by phone, making sure that all the town investments, the historical aspects of it, are protected to the best extent possible. In new selectmen training, we talked about that in the past, is June 8th from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Sharon Community Center. There is a $35 registration fee, but if you attend, then you can just submit that fee to us and we will reimburse you for that. That's all I have for updates. Oh, one other, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I apologize. You have before you a copy of the TIF agreement for IBA. This is sort of old business. The board has already approved this TIF, but this is just the language that goes into this agreement that the town meeting will be voting on next Monday night. Because of the time constraints with the state process in dealing with the EACC, they need to submit this application by next Thursday to the state of Massachusetts. So if you don't mind, you can read this after town meeting, assuming they vote in the affirmative. You can sign that night, this document, and we'll have the document prepared, and then I can hand it over to IBA and Lynn Tokarczyk, and they can take it to the state. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
We've already voted, so there's no need for an agenda item.
No, I think it's old business at this point.
Okay.
Okay, and now, oh, Dave?
Yeah, I'll go really quickly. Thank you for the update, Jim. You know, Jim didn't mention it. He also spoke at the Prime Metals groundbreaking ceremony, did an excellent job. So, you know, obviously, Prime Metals is, this is a big deal for them. I mean, they had their international and American CEOs at this event, as well as all their local officials, or many of their local officials from Worcester. So, you know, I just continue to be pleased that this is a project that is really going to enhance that property down there. So proud to have it. And it was a nice event. It was nice of them to have us. Thank you for the update on the Sibley Reservoir. Again, maybe not much we can do about it, but good to know. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just got 2 quick points. One's on Sibley. I'm glad to hear that the Conservation Commission has looked at it and they're comfortable. So ultimately, it's a state issue, but if the town board has input, then I'm satisfied. And in terms of signing the TIF, memory serves me correctly, we did establish a precedent with Prime Metals, because I think we were under similar time constraint.
That's
and
true.
I think we
And you did sign it that night,
It was
yeah.
old business, and we decided to after the town meeting approved it. So I'm very comfortable with that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Wendy.
Just one quick comment. I know there's been some discussion in town about how the elected seats are unopposed. I still encourage everybody to get out there and vote and do what you're supposed to do.
Jonathan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a question about the Sibley Dam. Is that a permanent breach?
It is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there, you know, I don't know the exact diameter, but they're gonna cut a hole in that dam, so there'll be no more impoundment of water behind that.
Okay. So there'll be no ponding at all? It will
No,
just be
it
like a river.
essentially eliminates a dam from the state's inventory, and, you know, it has never really been a dam per se. There's been no impoundment of the water. That discharge pipe has taken out all the water, and it's generally a marsh behind it. So there's really no long-term environmental impact on this. You know, I'm not the expert in that. I'm referring to experts that have looked at this.
Okay, that makes sense. And then as far as the agreement, I have no problem with, you know, voting on it, you know, signing it after the town approves it.
Thank you. And I have no comments. Next would be announcements, Selectmen's Roundtable, and correspondence. We'll put them all together.
Sorry about that, but one more thing this time. Last week, I think on Wednesday, Matt Stencil hosted the Arbor Day celebration. And because of weather, the thing had gotten rescheduled a number of times. It was difficult to get people there. But Mr. Friend showed up, the 4th grade was there, the highway department was there to help with all of the festivities. Matt did a great job, and it was a lot of fun as usual. So thanks to Matt.
Thank you, Dave. Very nice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have 2. First off, I'd like to thank St. Mark's. I delivered the monthly food pantry delivery service, and I'll tell you, this is probably the 5th or 6th month in a row where not only was the entire bed of my truck full donations, but I had to put it in the back seat. So the generosity of my community at St. Mark's is just phenomenal. So thank you for everyone who donated. And also, I'd like to send a quick shout out to a friend of mine, a young man by the name of Thomas Schultz, who was a Boy Scout in Troop 131. Earlier this afternoon, Cheryl Ruinski, myself, and a few members of Troop 131 went around to some of the cemeteries, and we replaced some of the flags at the veterans' graves in preparation for Memorial Day. And Thomas showed up, and I'll tell you, he put us all to shame. This young man worked hard, and we couldn't have done it without him, so thank you very much. And one last point, seeing how this is roundtable, I'd just like to just put it on the record that I think tonight was It was a good night for the Board of Selectmen. We had some significant issues come before us, and I think we all discussed it professionally. And, you know, regardless of the outcome, hopefully the community can appreciate the fact that, you know, everything was said tonight was, you know, from the heart, but also from the head. So thank you to my colleagues for an invigorating night. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just one quick reminder for people in town, if you have a transfer station sticker, this coming Saturday is brush chipping day. So keep those gentlemen busy on Saturday. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
I have nothing, thanks.
Yeah, I have nothing, too.
Mr. Chairman, then can I make a motion to adjourn?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.